My wife refused to wear her ring at work. I made her the office scandal. So, me and my wife Rachel had been married for 7 years, and everything was great until she got this new job at a marketing firm downtown. She was excited about the fresh start after being laid off from her previous company, and I was happy she found something that paid better. The first week she comes home talking about how amazing everyone is, especially her new mentor Brian, who's been showing her the ropes. I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring when she got home and asked about it. She said she forgot to put it back on after washing her hands at work. No big deal, happens to everyone. But then it kept happening. Every day she'd come home without her ring. When I brought it up again, she said the ring was too flashy for the office, and she didn't want to seem like she was showing off. Her ring was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing flashy about it. I offered to buy her a plain band to wear at work, but she said that would be silly, and she didn't need to wear a ring for people to know she was married. That's when things got weird. She started working late with Brian on presentations. She'd come home at 10 or 11 talking about how brilliant he was and how much she was learning. She changed her whole wardrobe, buying tighter dresses and higher heels. When I said she looked nice, she said it was important to look professional, and her old clothes were frumpy. She started going to happy hours every Friday without inviting me, saying spouses weren't really welcome at work things. Then I found out from her co-worker's Instagram that other people brought their spouses all the time. When I confronted her, she said she didn't want to be the new girl who needed her husband around to have fun. She wanted to establish herself independently first. 3 months into the job, I surprised her at work with lunch. The receptionist didn't know who I was when I said I was Rachel's husband. She actually said she didn't know Rachel was married. When I got to Rachel's desk, she was sitting on Brian's desk, laughing at something on his computer. Her hand was on his shoulder. The second she saw me, she jumped up and introduced me to everyone as her friend from college. Not her husband, her friend. Brian shook my hand and said he'd heard nothing about me. Rachel walked me out quickly, saying I shouldn't surprise her at work because it was unprofessional. I asked why she introduced me as a friend, and she said she panicked because she hadn't mentioned being married yet, and it would be awkward to explain now. She'd been there 3 months. That night I told her she either starts wearing her ring and telling people she's married or we're getting counseling. She cried and said I was being controlling and jealous. She said Brian was just a friend, and I was imagining things. She promised to wear her ring but said I was making a big deal out of nothing. The next day, she wore it. The day after that, it was gone again. She said it gave her a rash suddenly after 7 years of wearing it. I found the ring in her jewelry box wrapped in tissue paper, like she was storing it permanently. That weekend, her company was having their annual gala, black tie event at a hotel ballroom. Rachel said spouses were invited this time. She wore this red dress that looked amazing and actually put on her ring. We get there, and Brian immediately comes over. He's shocked to see me and asks Rachel who I am. Before she can answer, I stick out my hand and say loudly enough for others to hear that I'm Rachel's husband of 7 years. Brian's face goes white, and he excuses himself quickly. People start coming over to meet me, all saying they had no idea Rachel was married. The head of her department, Janet, says she's surprised because Brian had mentioned wanting to ask Rachel out. Rachel laughs nervously and says Brian must have been joking. Janet doesn't look convinced. During dinner, I give a toast, stand up with my champagne glass, and say how proud I am of my wife Rachel for doing so well at her new job. I talk about our 7 wonderful years of marriage, our plans to start a family soon, and how lucky I am that she wears my ring every day as a reminder of our love. I actually pull out my phone and show a photo from our wedding on the big presentation screen behind me that was set up for the awards later. The whole room is watching. Rachel stares straight ahead through the windshield as we pull out of the hotel parking lot. Her hands grip the steering wheel so tight her knuckles look white against the leather. I try to say something about how people seemed nice, but she doesn't respond. Not a word. Not even a glance in my direction. The silence feels heavy and thick between us. I turn on the radio, but she immediately switches it off without looking at me. 20 minutes of complete quiet as we drive through downtown and back to our apartment. When we finally get home and she parks the car, she sits there for a minute staring at the dashboard. Then she gets out, slams the door hard enough to make me jump, and walks fast toward our building. I follow her inside and up the stairs. The second we get through our apartment door, she spins around. Her face is red and her eyes look wet. She starts yelling that I humiliated her in front of everyone she works with, that I destroyed her professional reputation with my stupid stunt, that everyone was staring at her during the rest of the dinner and she wanted to disappear. I tell her she humiliated our marriage first, by pretending I didn't exist for 3 months, that she introduced me as a college friend like our 7 years together meant nothing. She says that's completely different and I know it, that what happens at work should stay separate from our personal life. I ask how hiding your husband is keeping things separate. She screams that I'm not listening to her, that I never listen. that I made everything about my hurt feelings instead of thinking about what this would do to her career. I say maybe she should have thought about our marriage before she took off her ring every morning, before she let Brian think he had a chance with her. She tells me Brian is just a mentor and I'm being paranoid and jealous, that I always do this, always assume the worst, always need to control everything. I tell her I'm not controlling, I just want my wife to act like she's married. She laughs, but it sounds mean. She says acting married apparently means letting me embarrass her in front of her boss and co-workers, making her look like a liar who can't be trusted. I try to explain that I was hurt and angry, but she cuts me off. Says she doesn't want to hear it right now, that she needs space. She walks to the guest bedroom and slams that door too. I sleep terrible that night. Keep waking up and checking my phone even though there's nothing there. Around 7 in the morning, I hear the guest room door open and footsteps in the hall. I get up quick and go out to talk to her, but she's already gone. Her purse isn't by the door, and her work shoes are missing from the rack. I find a note on the kitchen counter in her handwriting. It says she needs space, and she's staying at her friend's place for a few days. That we both need to calm down before we talk again. My phone buzzes with a notification, and I see 3 missed calls from my brother from last night. I must have left my phone on silent after the gala. I call him back and he answers on the first ring. He asks what the hell happened last night. Says his girlfriend saw something on Instagram about a dramatic toast at a work event. Some post from one of Rachel's co-workers showing the wedding photo on the big screen with a caption about unexpected revelations. The post already has like 200 likes and tons of comments. My stomach drops. I didn't think about people recording it or posting about it on social media. My brother asks if I'm okay and whether Rachel is there. I tell him she left this morning and is staying with a friend. He goes quiet for a second, then says we should probably talk later when I've had time to process everything. I hang up and sit on the couch, staring at nothing. The apartment feels too quiet and empty. My phone rings again around noon, and I see Trent's name on the screen. Trent Osborne has been my best friend since college. We met freshman year and stayed close even after we both graduated and got jobs. He heard about the gala through some mutual connections we have in the city. He asks if I'm okay and what happened last night. I tell him the whole story about Rachel hiding our marriage and introducing me as a friend and how I finally had enough. How I made the toast and showed our wedding photo to prove we were married. Trent listens without interrupting, which is unusual for him. When I finish, he asks if I thought through what would happen after my big reveal. I say I thought people would know the truth and Rachel would have to stop lying. He goes quiet again, and I can tell he's choosing his words carefully. He says Rachel was definitely wrong to hide being married, but asks if I considered how this would affect her at work. Whether embarrassing her publicly was really the best solution. I start to get defensive and say she deserved to be exposed for lying to everyone, that I had every right to tell the truth about our marriage. Trent says he's not arguing that point, but wonders if there was a better way to handle it. He suggests we meet for coffee to talk more, because this feels like a conversation we should have in person. I agree, and we make plans to meet tomorrow morning. 3 days go by without hearing from Rachel except for one text. On day 3, she texts saying she needs to get more of her things from the apartment. She asks what time I'll be home from work. I tell her I can leave early and be there by 4. She shows up at 4:30 with her sister, who I've never really gotten along with. Her sister gives me a cold look when they come in, but doesn't say anything. Rachel walks straight to the bedroom and starts packing a large suitcase. I follow her and try to apologize for doing it so publicly. I say I was hurt and angry, but maybe I could have handled it differently. She stops folding a shirt and looks at me. Her face looks tired, like she hasn't been sleeping well. She says the problem isn't how I did it. The problem is that I valued being right over her career and our marriage. That I cared more about proving a point than about what it would cost her. I try to argue that she was the one who lied first, but she cuts me off. Says she's not interested in keeping score about who did what wrong. That we both messed up, but my public confrontation made everything worse. She zips up the suitcase and her sister helps her carry it out. I stand in the bedroom doorway watching them leave. The apartment feels even emptier than before. I meet Trent at a coffee shop near my office the next morning. He's already there when I arrive, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He slides one across to me and asks how I'm holding up. I tell him Rachel took more of her stuff and I don't know when or if she's coming back. Trent nods and takes a sip of his coffee. Then he asks carefully whether I noticed Rachel seemed unhappy before the new job. I immediately say no. Everything was fine until she started working there and hiding me. Trent reminds me that Rachel mentioned feeling stuck last year when we all went out for dinner. That she talked about wanting more excitement in her life and feeling like she was in a rut. I tell him that was just work stress from her old job before she got laid off. Trent looks at me for a long moment, then asks if I'm sure about that, whether maybe there were signs I missed about her being unhappy in our marriage. The question makes me uncomfortable and defensive. I insist our marriage was solid until Brian came into the picture. Trent doesn't push it, but I can tell he doesn't agree with me. The conversation leaves me feeling confused about whether I missed something bigger going on with Rachel, whether this was really just about the new job, or if there were problems I didn't want to see. My phone rings while I'm driving home from the coffee shop with Trent. It's Rachel, and she sounds like she's crying. I pull over and answer. She's in her car, and I can hear the sound of traffic in the background. She says she just left a meeting with Janet and someone named Hugh Kerr who works in her department. They asked her pointed questions about why she hid being married, about whether she was having an affair with Brian or leading him on purpose. She's crying harder now and saying her co-workers are all gossiping about her, that people are talking about the gala and the toast and making up stories about what really happened. She says it's making work impossible and she can barely focus on her actual job. Then her voice changes from sad to angry. She says this is all my fault, that my need to embarrass her is now threatening the job she worked so hard to get, that I didn't think about the consequences before I decided to make a scene. I try to tell her I didn't know it would get this bad, but she's not listening. She hangs up before I can say anything else. I call Rachel back, but she doesn't answer. I send her a text saying I'm sorry, and I was hurt and felt invisible, that I didn't mean for things to get this bad at her work. She texts back an hour later saying, my hurt feelings don't justify sabotaging her workplace relationships, that what I did has real consequences she has to deal with every day now. She tells me Brian has been avoiding her completely since the gala, won't even look at her in meetings or respond to her emails about projects they're supposed to work on together. Janet is questioning whether Rachel has the judgment to work on client-facing projects anymore, whether someone who hid something this basic can be trusted with important clients. The professional consequences are getting worse than I ever imagined would happen. I thought people would just know the truth and move on. I didn't think it would affect her actual work or her relationships with her boss and co-workers. I feel sick reading her texts about what's happening. My brother calls me that night while I'm eating leftover pizza and watching television. He doesn't waste time with small talk. He tells me straight out that I acted like a controlling jerk at the gala, that Rachel was wrong to hide the marriage, but I made it way worse by turning private problems into public theater. He says everyone who saw the Instagram post thinks I'm either crazy jealous or trying to control Rachel by embarrassing her in front of her colleagues. I try to defend myself and explain how hurt I was, but he interrupts me, says being hurt doesn't give me the right to humiliate someone publicly, that there were 100 better ways I could have handled the situation. His criticism really stings because my brother usually takes my side in things. We've always been close and he's backed me up even when I was probably wrong. But this time he sounds disappointed in me, almost disgusted. I hang up feeling worse than before and start wondering if everyone sees me as the villain now. If Rachel's co-workers think I'm some controlling husband who can't handle his wife having a career. The thought makes me feel defensive, but also uncertain about whether I really did the right thing. Rachel texts me 2 days later with more bad news. HR wants to meet with her about the situation. Brian filed a complaint saying he feels uncomfortable working with her now, that he feels misled and deceived about her relationship status, and it's affecting his ability to work with her professionally. Someone named Penelope Lozano from HR is investigating whether Rachel broke any workplace rules by lying about being married, whether she created a hostile work environment or engaged in unprofessional conduct. Rachel's text sounds panicked. She says she might actually lose her job over this, that HR is taking Brian's complaint seriously and asking questions about whether she led him on intentionally or misrepresented herself to gain some kind of advantage. I read the text 3 times and feel sick to my stomach. My dramatic reveal at the gala might actually cost Rachel her job, the thing she was so excited about and worked so hard to get. I wanted her to stop hiding our marriage, but I never wanted her to lose her career over it. I text Rachel asking if we can meet to talk in person. I offer to go to counseling or whatever she needs. Anything to fix this mess I helped create. She doesn't respond for hours, and I think she's going to ignore me. Then finally she texts back saying she'll meet me at a coffee shop, but she's not making any promises about our future, that we have a lot to talk about, and she needs me to really listen this time. We agree to meet the next day at a place halfway between our apartment and where she's staying with her friend. When I get there, she's already sitting at a table in the back. She looks terrible. Dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy way that's not like her usual style. I sit down across from her, and she looks at me for a long moment without saying anything. Then she admits she's barely sleeping from all the stress at work. that the HR investigation is making everything worse and people are treating her differently now. Some are sympathetic, but others are cold and judgmental. She says she doesn't know how to fix any of this, or whether our marriage can survive what we've both done to it. I sit across from her at that coffee shop table and watch her fingers trace circles on her paper cup. She won't look at me directly. Her eyes keep moving to the window, to other customers, to anywhere but my face. I ask her what she means about being unhappy before the job started. She takes a long breath and finally looks up. She says I stopped trying after about 5 years into our marriage, that I used to leave notes in her lunch or plan surprise weekend trips to the coast, that I used to ask about her day and actually listen instead of just nodding while scrolling through my phone. She says the last 2 years felt like living with a roommate who occasionally had sex with her, that she felt invisible in ways I never noticed because I was comfortable and assumed she was too. The new job made her feel seen again. Brian asked questions about her ideas and remembered details from previous conversations. People at work treated her like she was interesting and worth knowing. She admits it felt good to be wanted again, to feel attractive and valued in ways our marriage hadn't provided in a long time. I start to defend myself but stop because examples flood my mind that prove her point. The birthday 2 years ago when I got her a gift card because I forgot to shop ahead of time. The anniversary last year when I suggested we just order takeout instead of going out because I was tired. The countless evenings I spent gaming or watching television while she read alone in the bedroom. I remember how she used to suggest date nights or weekend activities, and I'd say we should save money or that we could just relax at home. I took her presents for granted like she was furniture that would always be there. I tell her she's right about me getting lazy, that I stopped putting effort into us because 7 years felt permanent and I didn't think I needed to keep courting my own wife. Rachel's eyes get wet, but she doesn't cry. She says hiding the marriage was wrong and she knows that now. But it felt easier than coming home and telling me she felt lonely in our relationship. Easier than risking a fight or hearing me dismiss her feelings as her being dramatic. The lie grew bigger than she intended and she didn't know how to fix it without everything falling apart. Rachel tells me she started looking for new jobs because staying at the marketing firm is impossible now. Brian walks past her desk without speaking. Janet assigns her solo projects instead of teamwork and makes comments about professionalism during meetings. The other employees whisper when she enters the break room. Someone wrote "liar" on a post-it note and stuck it to her monitor while she was in the bathroom. She found it when she came back to her desk. HR cleared her of any policy violations, but the damage to her reputation is permanent. She's angry that my public confrontation destroyed what she worked hard to build, that I cared more about being right and exposing her than considering what would happen to her career afterward. She acknowledges her deception created the situation, but says I made it 100 times worse by turning private problems into public humiliation. She worked late and skipped lunches to prove herself at that company. Now everyone there sees her as the woman who lied about being married and led a coworker on. My parents call 3 days later after my brother told them Rachel moved out. My mom doesn't waste time with pleasantries. She asks why I thought humiliating Rachel in front of her entire company was the appropriate response to our marriage problems. I explain how hurt I was introduced as a college friend, how I felt erased from her life for 3 months while she built this whole professional world without me. My mom listens and then says I had every right to be angry and hurt, but that what I did was cruel and destructive, that I could have confronted Rachel privately or demanded couples counseling or even separated quietly. Instead, I chose public revenge that damaged her career and made me look controlling and vindictive. She says even my father thinks I went too far, and he usually takes my side in family disagreements. The lack of support from my own parents makes me feel completely alone. Like everyone sees me as the villain in this situation, even though Rachel lied first. I hang up feeling worse than before the call and wondering if I really am the bad guy everyone thinks I am. 2 weeks pass with minimal contact between us. Rachel texts occasionally about logistics like bills or mail that arrives for her. I suggest we meet again to talk about what happens next. She agrees, and we meet at a different coffee shop across town. This time I ask directly if anything physical happened with Brian, if she cheated on me beyond the emotional stuff. Rachel looks me straight in the eyes and swears nothing physical happened. No kissing, no sex, not even hand-holding beyond that moment I saw at her desk. But she admits she enjoyed his attention and the fantasy of being single and wanted again. That she didn't plan to act on it, but also didn't shut it down the way a married woman should have. She let him flirt and flirted back. She dressed up knowing he'd notice and liked when he complimented her appearance. She went to happy hours hoping he'd be there. She says she now understands that was emotionally unfaithful, even without physical cheating. that she betrayed our marriage by investing emotional energy into another man instead of working on our relationship. I admit things I haven't said out loud before, that I've been jealous and insecure about her success at the new job, that I felt threatened watching her build this professional life where she was confident and respected, and I wasn't part of it. I confess that part of my dramatic reveal at the gala was about asserting control, about reminding her and everyone else that she belonged to me regardless of her career accomplishments. The words sound awful when I say them out loud, like something an abusive husband would say. Rachel doesn't look angry when I finish. She looks sad. She says that possessive instinct is exactly what pushed her away, that I viewed her as mine to control rather than a partner with her own identity and ambitions. She says the marriage felt suffocating sometimes because I wanted her to stay the same woman I married 7 years ago instead of letting her grow and change. A week later, Rachel texts that she got a job offer from a smaller marketing firm on the other side of downtown. The pay is slightly less, but the hours are better, and the company culture seems healthier. She sounds relieved in her message. Says this forced reset might actually be good for her career in the long term. That getting out of the toxic situation at her current job removes the daily stress of facing people who judge her. She gives her notice, and her last day is scheduled for 3 weeks out. The immediate crisis of her work situation is resolving, but our marriage remains in limbo. We haven't discussed whether we're getting divorced or trying to fix things. We're just existing in this weird separated state where neither of us has made a final decision. We meet again and have to decide what happens next. Whether we try saving our marriage or accept that we've both damaged it beyond repair. Rachel says she's willing to try counseling if I am, but she needs me to understand that my public revenge created real harm that won't disappear just because we talk about our feelings with a therapist. That she needs to see genuine change in how I handle conflict and jealousy before she can trust me again. I agree to couples therapy and commit to examining my controlling behavior honestly, to figuring out why I felt entitled to humiliate her publicly instead of addressing our problems like an adult. We find a marriage counselor who has availability on Tuesday evenings and schedule our first appointment for the following week. The counselor is a woman in her 50s named Dr. Sarah Anderson, who has us sit on opposite ends of a couch in her office. She asks basic questions about how long we've been married and what brought us to therapy. Within 20 minutes, she identifies our core problem. We both buried resentments instead of communicating them. Rachel should have told me she was unhappy instead of seeking validation from Brian's attention. I should have addressed my jealousy and insecurity instead of planning public humiliation. Dr. Anderson says we both chose avoidance and deception over honest conversation, that we need to learn how to express difficult feelings without attacking each other or shutting down. Rachel admits she found it easier to enjoy Brian's flirting than risk telling me our marriage felt stale. I acknowledge that humiliating her publicly was about punishing her rather than fixing our actual problems. Dr. Anderson gives us homework assignments about identifying our feelings and practicing non-defensive communication. Rachel moves back into our apartment the following weekend, but keeps most of her things packed in the guest room. She says it's a safety measure in case counseling doesn't work, and we end up divorcing anyway. We're trying to rebuild, but both acknowledge it feels fragile and uncertain. Small moments of connection happen, like when we cook dinner together on Thursday night. Rachel chops vegetables while I handle the stove, and we move around the kitchen in our old familiar pattern. But then we sit down to eat. An awkward silence fills the space between us. We don't know how to talk to each other anymore, without everything feeling loaded with unspoken tension. We've broken so much trust that even simple conversations feel dangerous. 3 weeks into our Tuesday evening counseling sessions, Rachel's phone buzzes during dinner, and she glances at the screen before setting it face down on the table. I ask who it was, and she hesitates for just a second too long before saying, "It's Hugh from her old company, asking if she wants to get coffee sometime." My stomach drops, and I immediately demand to know why he's reaching out now after all this time. Rachel's face hardens, and she says he's just being friendly, trying to maintain professional connections in the industry. I can hear the edge in my voice when I ask if she thinks it's appropriate for a married woman to meet male co-workers for coffee. She stands up from the table and walks to the kitchen sink, her back to me, and says, "This is exactly the kind of controlling jealousy that therapy is supposed to be fixing." I start to argue that I have good reason not to trust her judgment about male attention after what happened with Brian, but I stop myself mid-sentence. I sit there at the table with my half-eaten dinner getting cold and force myself to recognize what's actually happening here. Hugh reaching out isn't about Rachel doing something wrong. It's about my own fear that she'll hide things from me again or seek validation from someone else. I walk to the kitchen and tell Rachel I'm sorry, that my reaction was about my insecurity and not about anything she actually did. She turns around looking surprised and asks if I'm serious or just saying what I think I should say. I tell her she should meet Hugh if she wants to maintain professional connections, that I trust her to set appropriate boundaries. Rachel studies my face for a long moment before saying it feels like actual progress, even though she knows it's uncomfortable for both of us. She doesn't meet with Hugh right away, but the fact that I gave her permission instead of forbidding it seems to shift something between us. 2 months after the gala disaster, Rachel starts her new job at the smaller marketing firm across town. She comes home on her first day and shows me photos on her phone of her new desk setup. Our wedding picture sits prominently in a silver frame next to her computer monitor. She tells me she made a point of mentioning her husband during the team introductions and showed everyone the photo when they asked how long we'd been married. She wears her wedding ring every single day now, and I notice she doesn't take it off the second she gets home anymore. It feels different this time, like she's actively choosing our marriage instead of hiding from it. I realize I'd been so focused on forcing her to acknowledge me publicly that I never considered what it would mean when she did it voluntarily. The difference between compliance and choice turns out to matter more than I expected. We're not completely healed, and probably won't be for a long time. Our marriage counseling sessions continue every Tuesday, and we're both still working through the damage we caused. I'm learning to recognize when my jealousy is about my own control issues, rather than Rachel's actual behavior. She's being more honest about her needs, instead of seeking validation from other men's attention. Our marriage looks different now, less comfortable but more honest. We don't have the easy routine we had before, but we have something more real. We're both accepting that sometimes you have to break something completely before you can build it back stronger. The trust we're rebuilding feels harder earned than the trust we started with, and maybe that makes it worth more in the end.